Normally every month I speak to you guys. I do the good, the bad, and the politically ugly in commercial real estate. But apparently I'm now taking requests. And I'm only going to be presenting on one topic today. And that topic is the recent NAR litigation. That's the Sitzer-Burnett case in federal court. So before I get into the meat of it, let me just ask by a show of hands, how many people are even vaguely familiar, just a vague familiarity with that case? Okay, leave your hands up if you don't mind, if you agreed with my initial assessment. When I first heard about the case, my knee-jerk reaction was, well, this is just a case of a jury not understanding agency law and going after what they deem a deep pocket. So did anybody agree with my initial assessment? Okay, a lot of people did. So that's certainly where I defaulted to when I heard the news, and then I read the pleadings, and I read the case.
Not all the hands went up, so could you give an overview of what the case is about?
Just getting started. Okay, so to summarize, this was a case, it was a class action lawsuit brought against NAR and all the big guys, the Keller Williams, Remax, sorry. You name it. And it was a class action antitrust suit against NAR and all the corporate defendants. Went to jury trial, and the jury did award the plaintiffs $1.8 billion in damages. Also applying for treble damages, punitive damages, court course filing fees, attorney's fees. We add it all up. The potential liability for NAR and all the corporate defendants is well over $5 billion. All based on antitrust claims.
If you think your dues are high now.
Right. So, here's what they alleged. They alleged that the defendants had conspired to require home sellers to pay the buyer broker's commission at inflated amounts, where sellers have absolutely no incentive to pay buyer brokers who are actively negotiating against the seller's interest, and that these practices constitute unfair anti-competitive practices. So in making these arguments, the plaintiffs relied on two main factual components. They were challenging the offer of compensation rule, the MLS rule. They were also challenging the clear cooperation policy. And I'll tell you how and why. So as you know, offer of compensation is a blanket offer. Okay? And what the plaintiffs alleged is that these blanket offers are supra-competitive, meaning they're not market-driven offers. And they're designed to inflate buyer brokers' commissions. And they're non-negotiable, effectively, and they're unilateral. The plaintiffs took the position that but for this policy, buyer brokers would have to compete with one another by offering lower commission rates. In addition, because this is a blanket standard, it doesn't take into account the quality, the experience of the buyer broker. So a first-year agent is getting the same amount of commission as a seasoned agent. In order to compete, if you didn't want to partake in this deceptively anti-competitive scheme, you'd have to generate your own MLS. And how many potential competitors are in a position to do that? In addition, as you know, you have to post your listings within 1 day. You are also forbidden, because of NAR policy, you are forbidden from making the terms of your offer contingent on a modification, even in a downward direction, of your commissions, of the offer of compensation. So even if you're a buyer's agent and you're willing to take a lesser commission than what was offered on the MLS, you cannot condition your offer on that lower commission. You first have to negotiate the lower commission first before presenting your offer. And then in reality, the plaintiffs allege, who the heck is going to do that? Nobody. So they're non-negotiable, pretty much. So taking into these two facts, there was three legal bases for the plaintiff's claim. The first is that commission rates are anti-competitively high. And this was very, very interesting to me. In making that argument, the plaintiffs compared other Western countries. They compared Singapore, Netherlands, Belgium, Israel, UK, Germany, Australia, New Zealand, and the list goes on. And in those countries, when a buyer does enlist the services of a buyer broker, they're paying that commission. And that commission is also significantly less than what's paid here in the States, usually between 1% to 3%. So the commission rates are anti-competitively high in the plaintiff's position. Results in price fixing, contrary to the Sherman Act, the antitrust laws. So, and this is also an interesting argument in that the plaintiffs allege that despite all the new competition in the industry, or your online platforms, the Zillows of the world, despite their presence in the industry, your commissions remained pretty much even for decades. And in making that argument, they took a look at other industries. And I found this a very compelling argument. They took a look at other industries and think about it. Travel, insurance, brokerages, meaning stock brokerages. These online platforms were industry disruptors in all of those industries, drastically changing each one of those industries, resulting in lower fees to the consumer, more competition, but not in real estate. So I thought that was a very interesting argument to make, and don't get angry with me for admiring the logic there, but it was an interesting argument to make. And their last point was that these NAR policies and MLS policies strongly encourage steering. Whether consciously or subconsciously, buyer brokers are incentivized to steer their potential buyers to those listings that are offering a higher offer of compensation. It makes sense. So the plaintiff's conclusions were, but for the rules promulgated by NAR and the MLS, the sellers would not have had to pay a buyer broker's commission at all. And that, but for those policies, they would all face downward pressures, free market competition in the amounts of the commissions earned. So what did NAR argue? And this is where I'm treading on a little light water, thin ice, I should say. NAR's arguments in response to the plaintiff's arguments,
Not so good.
pretty elementary. Pretty elementary. Not a lot of meat on those legal bones there. Just pretty much blanket statements or positions to make. They argue that the compensation rules ensure efficient, transparent, and equitable local broker marketplaces. Is it really that transparent? Your offers of compensation are between brokers. Consumers don't see those. Sellers can sell their home for more and have their home seen by more buyers. Well, how much more can they be sold? Enough to offset the payment of the buyer brokerage commission? I would have expected the analysis to go a little bit deeper there. Buyers have more choices and why not? So, the arguments against the defendants' arguments, again, were pretty elementary. And the court found that there's certainly a factual basis or reasonable question of fact as to whether or not there's liability there on behalf of NAR. And it went to a jury trial. And the jury, as you know, found NAR and all the corporate defendants guilty of antitrust violations in violation of the Sherman Act. So, what's the result? The immediate result is, well, now there's 1 million copycat lawsuits in every state. This one took place in Missouri, I think. Yeah, Missouri. Well, now it's happening in New York, all over the country. You're going to see more and more of these actions, and they're all challenging the offer of compensation rule. They're all challenging the clear cooperation policy, and we have a lot of headwinds to face. So what is NAR advising during this time?
Yeah,
It's gonna be years before the legal dust settles. Obviously, we know NAR is
Oh, we
appealing.
did.
They're
Yeah.
requesting a new trial, you name it.
Everybody's-
They're doing everything that they can. But until the dust settles, their advice is rely on your buyer brokerage agreements, go with buyer brokers, have the conversations with the clients, tell them that the commissions are negotiable, what makes your fees reasonable and your services valuable, rely on that until you can't. So, we have quite some time before this dust settles, but when it ultimately does, it is very possible that we will see a quite different commission structure, at least in the residential space. It might not be so different in the commercial space, but certainly countrywide and certainly affecting the residential space a lot more. So can I ask, now hearing the arguments put forth by the plaintiffs, did anybody change their opinion? Does anybody see any logic in their claims?
100% logical.
I think so. We have a couple of hands. Is that a hand for a yes or a hand for a question?
And for a question.
Go ahead.
So, I'm well familiar with the lawsuit. Just came back from California, and this was just the top of the conversation. But there is a lot more to it than meets the eye. First of all, the Code of Ethics for NAR clearly states that we are supposed to let our clients know what their compensation is in the process.
That little
Okay?
button there turns it off.
Okay, I won't touch that one.
Don't touch the button.
So it clearly states that we are supposed to have the discussion with our clients about compensation. And I will say this, New York is a different animal than where these lawsuits have come from, okay? So just know that. We are still all gonna be affected by whatever the NAR results are. But now that they've appealed it, it's going to be going into the courts where it's only, I believe, like, it's a grand jury, you might know better, Mike, but it is only going to be looked at by other judges and Supreme Court folks. It's not going to be looked at in front of a jury the next time around for the appeals. Based on that, they feel that they will, and listen, I do agree that they dropped the ball when they presented this offer. I think they thought it was gonna be a shoo-in, simple, easy, and it wasn't. They now revamped, they understand the mistakes they've made, and they're going to be putting a lot more into it. And they're hoping that the people that they're gonna be presenting to in the future are educated individuals in the business world and understand the compensation, how it works, and how for a buyer, not having representation in a transaction is gonna be very detrimental to them. The buyer in itself is gonna be who suffers if they cannot have or afford to pay for representation. I mean, we know what happens now with that, right? So there is a lot more to come with this, but just know that NAR's stance is to please be clear about your compensation to your buyers and your sellers and how it works. And what is the benefit for the seller to pay a buyer's broker agent, and the benefit of an MLS and how they can get, more buyers coming through and so on. So that's where NAR is right now. Just please be clear in whether it's commercial, residential, be clear on who's compensating the individual. So stay tuned.
Good one.
Federal.
Okay, and my quick conclusion is that this does not stand for the proposition that 6% is too high or too low. It's more about the process and the sharing between the buyer and seller broker.
The
Do you agree?
commissions are not market driven.
Okay.
And that's the whole basis of the argument.
Got it.
If the commission structures were market driven,
Yeah.
they'd be significantly less.
Thank you.
Well,
I'll disagree with that.
3 points. First of all, I would argue that it is market-driven. Because I remember when you'd sell your house, it would be a 6% commission. I don't know anybody selling their house or anybody here getting a 6% commission on selling a house? On selling a house?
I know, yeah, don't talk commissions.
No. I'll get it on commercial, but no longer on residential. So there definitely has been market-driven and an adjustment over time from a 6% down to a 4%. So yes, there has been a disruption, and yes, it has responded to the marketplace, and it's a 4% rather than a 6%. Of course, I'm not suggesting that's what you should charge, because that would not be appropriate. That would be against the antitrust.
Good point.
Okay. In Europe, the tenant pays the broker. They hire their broker like they hire their attorney. But very frankly, if the deal doesn't go through, anybody here ever had a deal that didn't go through? No matter how good a broker you are, we don't get paid for most of what we do. In Europe, they're gonna get a minimum fee anyway for show up. Not as much as if the deal actually does get transaction, but they're getting paid. So can they work on a lower commission basis? Sure. And if I got a 1 or 2% on everything I worked on, I'd make more money than I'm gonna get, because I don't get paid for most of what we do. The last thing is in terms of the commissions being negotiable. Do we say they're negotiable? No. How many times, well, look, I got your offer. It's close, but not quite. So if you cut your commission in half, I'll do the deal. Anybody ever heard a discussion, anything resembling that? At that point, is the commission negotiable? So much of the arguments that they're not.
You had brought up a good point, and Paul brought up rentals. And there was an article in Bloomberg this week, and quite frankly, it was scathing. It was scathing. And it was scathing for a reason that you might not expect. It was scathing because this ruling in this editorial's position didn't go far enough. It didn't go far enough to include rentals, and then it did a whole analysis of residential rentals in Manhattan, or in the properties. And they say that renters usually charge a broker's fee between 10 to 15% on a lease. And they do the calculations on your average lease. You know, a renter has to come up with, on average, about 16 grand out of pocket. And they felt that this ruling didn't go far enough because it had to do with sales, and not just rentals as we had stated. So there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of positions on this. I have emailed Howell 3 links, 2 anonymous. One is another link from a nice synopsis. It's like a FAQ by a local board. I think it was North Carolina. I just thought it was well presented, so I emailed that to Howell. So those 3 links. If you have any other questions and you want to get a little bit deeper into the weeds there on this case, the links I think will be up on the LICN website.
Later today.
Soon.
Later today.
I don't know if we have time. I don't want to cut
Yeah, we
into
do.
Doug's oh, okay.
If it's quick.
Yeah, quick.
1, 2.
Quickly, I'm with Paul 100%, but is NAR going to get its act together? You see any signs of it, or are we gonna be sunk by
Well,
companies?
You know, when I was reading this complaint, and if anybody wants to actually read the complaint, I can email it to you. It's only about 60 pages long. I was really impressed. I have to say, this was another example of really good lawyering. Last month,
Is there such a thing?
there is just like there's a value to a good agent, there's a value to a good attorney as well. And this was really, really good lawyering. These arguments were very, very well presented. And having read it, I can really see how they swayed a jury and why. To answer your question, yes, NAR's appealing it. They're going to try and have a new trial for whatever reason. I don't know if they'll be successful, but we'll find out. We'll find out.
But didn't some of the companies settle? So isn't that gonna kind of?
One of them.
But doesn't that kind of, if I settle and you say it's not correct,
But it's
isn't
not-
that kind
it's
of
different,
contradictory?
It's different. So NAR's position is different than those companies
Right.
who their employees were violating the antitrust.
That's why they settled.
Okay.
NAR, there's no specific.
I'm just from the cheap
Yeah,
seats, you know.
understood, but those companies they were defending their employees, it was a different.
Last question?
It's really not a question, just two kind of statements. As a non-broker, I'm sympathetic to the way people here feel about this, but I've bought and sold properties over the years. No one's ever informed me of any of this, so the facts are the facts. And I'm a pretty seasoned person. And secondly, we mentioned for 30 years I was an institutional stockbroker. So my clients were Fidelity and JP Morgan Bank, not some guy in the street. And when I started, we had a fixed schedule. And even if you're selling to Fidelity, it was based on the price of the stock and the number of shares. And we had like 48 cents a share being paid by institutional investors. Once the lawsuits came and this happened, for most of my career, it was like 5 or 6 cents a share, and I got out of the business when it went to half a penny a share. So just be prepared, because that's the trend of the future, I think.
I agree. I think there's real potential for market disruption here, but several years will show.
Takes
Have
some
time-
Okay,
Go ahead.
we're gonna do one more. Suzanne, go ahead, and then,
I just want to say, someone has to break it down to when we explain to clients. The people on the jury, some of them never use a realtor, so I think it was jury selection.
That's exactly non-negotiable.
Most people don't even know that we don't get a dime until we get to a closing table. And we can have listings for 2 months or 7 months because the seller doesn't take an offer. And you break it down to hourly, I mean, sometimes it's like the minimum wage. So I
The other
think
thing
that has
too-
to be out to the public that we are the only people who do not get paid. And how would they feel if they went to work
Right.
for
But that is
500
every
hours
salesperson.
and got paid 0?
And to that same point, as a listing agent, on your listings, I'm sure you've had transactions where the selling agent was completely useless, did nothing, right? You got the listing, they brought the buyer, did nothing, and they got that commission. I'm sure that didn't sit well with you. Now, if that commission was being paid by the buyer, you as a real estate professional might not be faced with that potential problem any longer, right? They'd be much more invested in the transaction, not just mailing it in. That's what Larry.
Yeah, I basically wanted to support Sue, and I was feeling the same way. You know, I sell quite a few businesses now, and the personalization is similar as commercial and residential real estate, in the sense that there's a physical side to our business, where all these other businesses that you had pointed out are really data-driven businesses over the internet. You can do securities. I was a securities broker when I was very young. That all changed because of the availability of the internet. This business, all of those businesses, by the way, you can buy your insurance through data. You can do all of that. This business knows that it's really, truly a hand-holding business. And the cost of T&E, those businesses don't encompass this. And it doesn't cost the time. And the cost of time, the window time, the dead time that we have to go on those appointments.
Larry, these are great points, and
this
you might
is
want to
tr-
talk to Norm.
This
These
is
are great
truly,
points to
this
raise.
is truly an old world business. When I was an importer, and I had 32 reps throughout the country, all they did was travel the country. So this is an old world business, and I think from that perspective, if you're an ethical business person, inherently, and you get up, like, I mean, all this stuff about ethics and all that, to me, is just irrelevant. Either it's in you or it's not in you. You're gonna do it the right way, or you're not. But the travel and the time and the hand-holding and everything, and the
So-
expense to get the business done is very different from all those data-driven businesses.
I get it, and my reaction to you, Larry, is that wouldn't that have been a great picture for Norm to paint? Those are good arguments. I don't,
all right, we,
so,
that's it, but this is
really.
This is really it. Really, this is the end.
And
My eggs are
also,
cold.
and also, I feel it's just an impression. that you're putting something in front of a jury, okay? I don't know how the voir dire went and how they got the jurists. I hope that they were very equitable and honest people listening to the problem. But I can't help but feel that simply when you are faced with a problem is you can pay less for your house if you pay less commission, that they have a preset in their mind going, yeah, of course what are you kidding? I could pay less, I could pay less. They are not looking at the core, not hearing the core problem, and the poor presentation of NAR has done us no good.
I never said that.
Okay.
Those are your words, not mine.
Hey, Mike.
If anyone-
Mike, notice that the only profession they did not compare to was attorneys, with no disrespect. But look at what that attorney is walking away with compared to what we walk away with.
Okay, all right, go ahead, Larry, last comment. And then we're done.
If we
No more
represented,
recordings.
if we represented the buyer, which in turn we really do, then we wouldn't be having this conversation. Because ethically,
If the buyer was paying you.
that's right. And that's really, I think that's the crust of this.
And that's exactly the.
And when I started in this business, I said to myself, why am I doing this? Why aren't we
It's a mixed
all
way.
these courses that we take basically funds.
Well, that's a good, Asher brought up a point, that buyers don't have the resources to pay a commission, okay?
Listen,
Well, let me just finish.
Majority,
You know what?
majority of buyers.
All right, tell you what, we'll take that conversation offline. If anyone has any questions.
You know what, we could debate this until kingdom
We're
come.
not gonna have.
If anybody wants a complaint, email me or call me, 631-390.
Wait, everybody, please, okay.
If you'd like a copy of the complaint or of any of the other pleadings, please give me a call, 631-390-0010. My direct extension is 145. Thank you for the extra time. Doug, I apologize.
No problem.
And see you next month.
What I would do is, I am happy to put up a discussion on our Facebook about this, and people can feel free to debate. People can feel free to debate this.
Don't do that.
What?
No,